So I noticed your home smells of feces.
Yes?
And not just monkey feces either.
Could we talk about something else?
First of all, do you believe in evolution?
Personally, yes.
Okay. How old are you?
20.
Okay. The reason why you believe in evolution is because that's all you've ever been taught. And because it's the prevailing paradigm in academia and the sciences and documentaries.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Now, I'm going to ask you a question. If I were to randomly generate ones and zeros at a bit level in a computer, in a supercomputer that could simulate millions of separate threads and simulate trillions of years, would I ever produce executable computer code?
Probably not.
Good. Then why would you believe that random mutations could produce the genome? Because you know why? It's because you were taught that it happened. Because you see, at a genome level, you have to believe that random mutations occurred incrementally, bit by bit at a molecular level, building the immensely complex instruction sets of the genome. Okay, do you know that the coding sequence for the least complex proteins have anywhere between 1 and 200 amino acids in their chain? Each coding sequence for an amino acid is a 1 in 20 chance if it occurs through mutations by chance. 1 in 20. The second coding sequence for an additional amino acid to produce a protein would be 1 in 400. Okay,
Yeah.
You see how the improbability grows exponentially.
The environment reduces that, though.
No, you're not. Listen. You, and this is not an insult. It's not an insult as to your education or your intelligence or your comprehension. But you have been brainwashed to believe that in a grand universe that is large enough and old enough, that given a monumentally gargantuan amount of trials can overcome the improbability of mutations producing the complexities of the genome. You've been brainwashed to believe that. But what you haven't been taught are what are the actual odds. Okay? Mm-hmm. Now, most proteins in life are very, very complex, right? In terms of their amino acid structure. Their polymers are chains of amino acids, right?
Yeah.
The functionality of a protein has to do with the specific arrangement of the amino acids. Change the arrangement of the amino acids and you change the function of the protein. Not only that, it's also the folding of the protein that deals with its functionality, not just the arrangement of the amino acids.
Some more layers. Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, we're getting complex. So let's take the least complex proteins that might be out there. Notice I said least complex as opposed to simple proteins because there are no simple proteins. Let's say we take an amino acid chain of 100 amino acids. Now, since the arrival of that protein is not teleological, in other words, it's not the result of purpose by a design. It's the result of happenstance, of mutations accumulated over a long period of time. So for the first amino acid to be correct in a functional sequence, just like the letters of, the Declaration of Independence, the first one is 1 in 20. The second one is 1 in 400. The third coding sequence for an amino acid is 1 in 8,000.
Oh boy.
Okay, so each additional amino acid that has to be in the correct functional sequence. When I say functional sequence is, let me give you an illustration of letters of the alphabet producing functional information, right? Out of all the possible arrangement of random letters in an alphabet,
mm-hmm.
only an infinitesimal small arrangement of letters will yield meaningful or functional information. Now, there's a myriad of of arrangement of letters producing functional information, from a child's storybook to an encyclopedia or a science textbook, right?
Yep.
I mean, we have many children's books. We have many scientific texts, right? So we could call that functional information or specified complexity. But let's look at the converse. The number of non-functional or meaningful arrangements dwarfs, and that's even an understatement, the number of functional statements. In other words, the number of non-functional arrangements makes the functional arrangements seem infinitesimally small. So people have to believe that there have to be enough time to do it. Anthony Flew was a lifelong philosophical champion of atheism. Toward the end of his life, when he was an older man, his mind was still lucid. And people who had some expertise in the complexity of DNA went to him and explained to him how complex the coding sequences are for DNA. I mean, they are mind-bogglingly complex. And they explained to him, even if we imagine a massive, incomprehensibly massive universe with trillions of Earth-like solar systems. Notice I said trillions.
Yeah.
You could even have a trillion solar systems, okay, like ours. A trillion. Do you know how many zeros that would be? That would be 24. Okay? A trillion would be 1 followed by 24 zeros. Now, one of the least complex proteins out there, the odds of it being randomly formed, okay? It doesn't matter, people want to invoke trials. You're talking about 1 in 20 to the 100th power.
Yeah.
That's 100 zeros. Now, by the way, I haven't even given you the precise odds there. That's just a very quick, rough thing. Because if you have 100 amino acids, and each one in the specific position is a 1 in 20 chance, because there's only 20 amino acids that could be selected, right?
Yeah.
You're still dealing with, of that particular functional sequence, 1 or 10 to the power of over 100 zeros, right? 100 zeros. Now, even the most least complex life forms that we know of has an ensemble of complex proteins required for it. So why hasn't this dissuaded people from believing in evolution at an academic and scientific level? Okay?
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you why. It's because when Charles Darwin's theory of evolution came along, it was a paradigm shift. He didn't discover anything. He just postulated how incremental changes, how he imagined, could produce the complexity of the animal kingdom without the need of a designer or a creator. That began to snowball and became widespread, that it facilitated the shift in the sciences and academia from theism to materialism. Once materialism took over from the start of Darwinism, like in the late 1850s, Darwin published around 1857 or something like that.
Yeah.
Once this spread throughout academia, there was a paradigm shift. And you can actually learn about this if you study the philosophy and history of science, that science is governed by paradigm shifts. In fact, one of the greatest books, which I haven't read yet, but I intend to read, on the philosophy of science is called The Structure of Scientific Revolutions by Thomas Kuhn, where he says science is governed by paradigms, not by individual discoveries. And the only way for paradigms to change is that the old guard literally dies out. and they give up their old paradigms, and the new guard is open. But that's not always the case. But the bottom line is simply this: is the paradigm of naturalistic materialism is thoroughly entrenched in academia and in the scientific community. And so since they already believe evolution has happened, they simply ignore the monumental mitigating improbability that random mutations could produce the genome. They figure, well, evolution happened, so highly improbable events happen. But from a purely probabilistic standpoint, there's no reason to believe that mutations could achieve that. Even the observation of beneficial mutations is not a justification that random mutations can build new complex systems, body parts, and plans that didn't exist before. Beneficial mutations only produce novel effects on pre-existing DNA sequences. So, for example, when they mutated E. coli in the millions of generations, and it mutated where it could now digest certain things where it couldn't digest before, they go, look, this is proof of evolution. No, it isn't. It's simply proof that over millions of generations, you might have a novel effect for survivability to eat something or digest something that it couldn't digest before. But the DNA code to digest substances already existed. The mutations just produced a novel effect to eat something that it couldn't eat before.
Right.
That's not a justification that random mutations can build entire genomes from scratch. But when I say by scratch, I don't mean the idea. What do they call it? Something monsters. I can't remember what the term is. The coding sequences for your brain and your kidneys and your heart and your lungs and all of your complex systems are extremely long in the DNA code, and they're highly susceptible to lethal mutations. That if you have certain mutations in some of these readings, you die in utero. And so the only reason why people believe that mutations is the means that facilitated natural selection is because if they don't, then they have to believe in special creation.
Don't you eat this pie?
Okay. All right, Pie. I'm just going to do this. Hop, 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 hop. And if you get eaten, it's your own fault. Hop, 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 hop. No! Oh! Oh! My... Oh, the hell with it.